Thank you for joining us for another presentation of the design for the Tobin Montessori and Vassal Lane Upper Schools project. I'm Sean O'Donnell, a principal at Perkins Eastman, the architect for the project. We've been hard at work developing the design, and in this presentation we will share some important aspects of the work in progress that are particularly focused on the site. Following this video, we'll set up a teleconference to discuss these developments with you directly. We look forward to that conversation. To address today's issues, we've gathered several members of our interdisciplinary design team, including myself, Carolyn Day, Omar Calderon, and Dan Ahrens from Perkins Eastman Architects, as well as Sean Manning, our lead traffic engineer, and Chris Bradner, our lead landscape architect. While there have been many refinements of the design of the interior of the building, we're going to focus today on some elements of the design that are quite literally enabling us to connect the school to the surrounding community. These developments include how we're designing to retain similar access to sunlight and shade for the abutters to the property, how our traffic analyses are informing access to the site, and how the design will enhance access to and across the site. To provide context for this information, we'll begin with a short summary of the overall design. But before we dive in, Carolyn, why don't you briefly review our progress relative to the project's schedule?
As Sean noted, we have been working diligently on the design through the last several months, collaborating with the full project team and the city. We are currently moving through schematic design. In this phase, we are focused on refining the plans of the building and the outdoor space, making sure that we have everything organized as best we can within the constraints and opportunities of the site. Schematic design lays the groundwork for the subsequent phases of design. Due to the pandemic, Cambridge Public Schools made the decision to continue to use the Tobin School building for the full academic year rather than moving into swing space. As a result, we will not be able to complete investigatory work or begin site work until after the students move out in June. While this has changed the timing of a couple of early packages, it does not affect our overall design schedule. Final construction documents are still planned to be complete in April of 2022. As we refine the design, we are looking forward to your continued participation and input. This timeline shows the meetings we have already had and those planned for the future. As you can see, we will hold one more community meeting as we wrap up the schematic design phase, and there will be more opportunity for feedback after that. We have also been working with focus groups of educators and meeting the city departments to get their input on the design. Omar will now reflect on the design to date.
Before we jump into the specific issues we want to discuss, let's briefly review the option that is the basis of our schematic design. This option, as you will recall, has been developed through the community process and has responded to the feedback that we have received. While we might at times use shorthand to talk about the programs on the site, it is important to remind ourselves of the range of programs and the diversity of ages that we're designing for. From the DHSP preschool and the Tobin Montessori lower school to the Vassal Lane upper school, we are designing great new indoor and outdoor learning environments for children ranging in age from 3 to 13. We are also renewing Father Callan Playground for active use by both the community and the schools. With the community's input, we have optimized the building's footprint to maximize the usable outdoor space on the site. And as we design the building and the site, we are also addressing several other goals that support Cambridge's larger vision, including targeting net zero emissions, addressing neighborhood flooding with a 1.25 million gallon stormwater storage tank and associated rain gardens, and providing pathways linking to adjacent parkland and pathways for the community to bike and walk across the site. The building is organized to create a welcoming and child-scale places for each of the programs. The heart of the school at the center of the building enables each of these programs to share facilities, including the gyms, dining, and auditorium during the day. After hours, the heart will enable active community use at these facilities as well. To optimize the programs and the outdoor space, we organize the building by stacking the schools vertically. This provides for greater connectivity inside the building and reduces the overall footprint of the building on the site. We have also been actively designing to reduce the perceived scale of the building from the outside in order to be a good neighbor. For example, we have broken the building up into smaller masses horizontally and vertically and stepped down from 4 floors to 3 as we approach the closest houses on Alpine Street. Our discussion of sun and shade will continue this conversation in a moment. These renderings are meant to illustrate those strategies, showing how the base, middle, and top of the building are being distinctly defined, and how vertical and horizontal setbacks in the facade help to reduce the perceived scale of the building. And speaking of scale, the side of the building that's facing the Father Callanan Playground and Concord Avenue has more of a civic scale, as you can see here. The story is a little bit different on the Vassal lane of the school, where the scale is more residential. But now, returning to the site, we are creating a diverse landscape full of opportunities that will feature the existing healthy trees, support our sustainable goals, and connect the entirety of the site, as we will discuss in greater detail in a moment. Now Dan will walk us through the solar axis, shade, and shadow analysis.
Thanks, Omar. The building is located to enhance the use of Father Callanan Playground and to facilitate access by foot, bicycle, car, and bus. So the building massing has stacked up to the south, and as you'll recall, it's also stacked higher toward the west, away from Alpine Street. We've been studying how the massing and articulation of the building contributes to the overall performance of the building and site, and would like to share with you how we've been modeling this performance. First, a reminder of the context for this. As with the King Open and MLK schools, the new Tobin Vassal building will be net zero emissions. That is, it will require no fossil fuel to be burned on site because it will be an all-electric building. Here's a reminder of some of the strategies we're using. First and foremost, we have oriented the building toward the south, utilizing passive heating and cooling strategies to the greatest extent possible. From passive strategies, we move to high-performance systems and controls, and finally incorporate renewable power generation through photovoltaic panels. We are now modeling an energy use intensity, EUI, which would make this building the most efficient school building in Cambridge, with an EUI of 22 kiloBTUs per square foot per year, which would be largely offset by rooftop power generation for a net load of 8. And we are looking at further reductions through the placement of facade and site photovoltaic arrays. We are taking both an aesthetic and analytic approach to solar design. We've been studying sunlight and shading on site, and importantly with regard to any impact of the proposed building on our neighbors. Our study has begun with understanding the current conditions and then compares this with the proposed. We want to understand this in space and also in time. So let's look at this comparison over the course of the year. Let's take the summer first. You can see the existing building on the left and the proposed building on the right. We see that during the summer, the sun rises north of east and sets north of west. The shadows are longest in the morning and evening and have little impact beyond the property line. Because the proposed building mass is pushed to the west, there's very little change to the shadow patterns along the east property line. Note that lovely trees along the property line shared with our Alpine Street neighbors. We intend to preserve these trees, which do the majority of summertime shading. And now let's look at our findings. We see here composite images of each hour of shadows during the summer solstice overlaid on the site. We've used a computational model to calculate the time that shadows fall on the houses along Alpine Street and found that the proposed condition reduces solar access for those houses by 10 minutes per day. Okay, let's look at the winter solstice when shadows are the longest. Note that the trees have shed their leaves, so they provide limited shading at this time of year. What's interesting is that because the sun's path is from the southeast to the southwest, the shadow impact is mostly on the playground to the north, not on the properties to the east or west. There's very little change from the existing to the proposed. We round out our study by looking at the spring and fall equinoxes, which have intermediate shadows compared to the summer and the winter. The sun rises due east, passes to the south, and sets due west. The proposed condition is slightly more impactful than the existing. The composite for the equinox shows a reduction in daylight access from 2 hours and 56 minutes to 2 hours and 44 minutes, or about 5%. We know that daylight is a very important component of enjoying the Callanan playground and adjacent homes. We hope that this helps you understand the impact of the proposed building, and we'll be happy to answer questions after the presentation. Right now, though, Sean Manning of VHB will speak of another important aspect of the project: transportation.
Thank you, everyone. And again, good evening. My name is Sean Manning. I'm with the firm VHB. We're responsible for defining the transportation infrastructure for the project and conducting the traffic studies that will become part of the TIS, the traffic impact study that'll be submitted for review by the City of Cambridge. We've got a number of slides to share with you tonight, including a recap of future student program and enrollment and parking needs. This really drives a lot of the access and circulation infrastructure elements of the project, as well as the TIS itself. And we're going to talk about net new trip generation. That would be new trips that are going to be generated by the project, given those increases in enrollment and staffing. COVID-19 considerations. I know this has been a big question of many as to how we are contending with COVID-19 and studying the school, given some of the most immediate challenges as it relates to people coming and going from school. We're going to walk through the site plan, and we're going to walk through all the study intersections that we're currently focused on, and then give you a sense of traffic impacts, where we stand with that right now, and most importantly, walk you through key findings and improvements that we're building into the site plan to make the school work. And then finally, just some future collaboration as it relates to our conversations with the City of Cambridge and, of course, the community. One of the challenges we've had in pulling together a traffic study this year, not just for the Tobin School, but really for all of our projects, is related to the collection of traffic data, because clearly the movement of people in vehicles is far different this year than it has been any other year that I certainly can remember. So what we're doing in light of that is looking to collect whatever historic information we have in the area, and there is some available that either we, VHB, had in-house or we were able to obtain through the City of Cambridge. And we're merging that with some very detailed cell phone information that we're able to obtain from cell phone providers and merge those together to get a solid transportation study network for the various time periods that we're looking at, denoting typical traffic conditions. This slide provides a quick recap of anticipated changes in program and enrollment in the various components of the school. These numbers are identical to what was presented and included as part of the feasibility study, and they're key in terms of us determining trip generation, parking, and drop-off requirements for those various elements. And we'll talk about those in greater detail as we go through some of the following slides. So again, this is another slide that was presented at the end of the feasibility study, and I wanted to share it again so people would understand volume of traffic during various time conditions, and then how those volumes are anticipated to change given program elements of the school. So this slide is denoting the morning peak hour drop-off period starting at 7:15 a.m. and going on into the mid-morning, 9:30 in the morning. The blue denotes those traffic volumes that are attributable to the existing school, and then the orange denotes net increases. So if you look at the bars, for example, from 7:15 to 8:05, that's related to the Tobin school, and then from 8:15 to 8:45, 8:55 is the Vassal Lane school. And you can see Vassal Lane, because the enrollment is projected to be higher in the Vassal Lane than the Tobin, you see more orange in those bars than you do earlier in the morning with the Tobin. The bars off to the right are related to the preschool, which tends to be a little more intermittent in terms of when those arrivals occur in the morning. So similar to the morning arrival period, we've done the same for the afternoon dismissal period, with the Tobin school dismissing first at 1:55 p.m. and then the Vassal Lane school dismissing an hour later at 2:55. And again, the blue denotes current school volumes under typical conditions. The orange denotes incremental increases given program changes. And again, the Tobin school, because of the age of the children, you see higher traffic volumes attributable to higher drop-off pickup of those kids. The Vassal Lane is lower, although you see that the orange bars are thicker than they are at Tobin, again, because the change in enrollment is higher in the Vassal Lane school. And then off to the right is related to preschool pickup, which tends to, again, happen over a longer period of time and coincides later in the afternoon. This slide summarizes total net new vehicle trips that are expected relative to those changes in employment and enrollment that were presented previously. The morning peak is representative of morning arrival time. It's really related to Tobin arrival earlier in the morning. Afternoon is afternoon dismissal of the Tobin school, and then evening is coinciding with the evening peak commuter hour, which is mostly related to preschool traffic. And as you can see, we're expecting around 129 net new total trips during the morning, 21 in the afternoon dismissal period, and then 72 later in the evening related to the preschool. The scope of the traffic study includes the analysis of 17 area intersections, very extensive. And the reason we did this is we know various streets and neighborhoods that surround the school are going to want to understand the relative traffic impacts to their streets. And that's why we've included so many locations. For reference, you'll notice that one is in blue, Concord at Alpine. That's simply representing that is a signalized intersection. The red circles indicate those locations that are unsignalized. One of the initial steps that's taken when pulling a traffic study together is to understand, given the changes in vehicle trips, how those vehicle trips would arrive and depart the site that's being studied. So in this case, we have delineated staff trips first, and I'll talk about students on a following slide, showing how those staff trips are going to arrive in the morning and enter the ramp that connects to below grade parking and then exit in the afternoon. And this distribution is really identical to how staff arrive and depart currently, although the curb cut that they would be accessing obviously is different, whereas in the current school configuration, they're using the westernmost curb cut to get to surface parking. Here, they would be going a little bit further down Vassal and then entering a ramp that brings them below grade to the below grade parking structure. The distribution of student trips is related entirely to student pickup drop-off, which again is being accommodated below grade underneath the school, with those trips distributed entering from a combination of from Fresh Pond, Parkway, Lakeview Avenue, and then Standish Street, which lines up with the ramp connecting to the below grade parking, in those vehicle trips exiting to Vassal Lane and then continuing straight on Vassal Lane or turning left or right on Fayweather. The following slides denote traffic volumes on streets surrounding the school, and then the relative change in traffic volumes that are anticipated with the new school being put in place and being fully enrolled. So this slide is denoting morning peak hour traffic volumes on area streets from 7 to 8 a.m. It coincides with peak flow related to the arrival of Tobin Montessori School staff and students. The numbers in orange represent anticipated increases in traffic along area streets and corridors surrounding the school site. As an example, if you look at Vassal Lane, where the existing morning peak hour volume has been determined to be 230 vehicles, we would expect an additional 58 vehicles to travel on that street in connection with the new school in place. This would be the same for the other various corridors that are denoted on the slide. Similar to the morning peak hour, area traffic volumes were also compiled for the afternoon dismissal period. In this case, we're indicating the hour of 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, which coincides with the Tobin Montessori dismissal period. And again, the numbers in blue denote existing condition traffic volumes on area streets during that time period. Similar to the morning peak hour, the numbers in orange denote anticipated increases in vehicle trips during the 2 to 3 o'clock afternoon dismissal hour that was studied. So again, using Vassal Lane as an example, 108 vehicle trips have been compiled to be traveling along that corridor during this hour, and we would anticipate that volume to increase by 13 vehicles with the new school in place. Again, this slide denotes existing condition traffic volumes in the neighborhood during the evening peak hour from 5 to 6 p.m. And once again, the numbers noted in orange here represent anticipated increases in peak hour traffic during the evening commuter peak hour relative to the new school. In this case, this is related almost entirely to preschool dismissal in the afternoon. I'll cite Vassal Lane as an example again, where there are 149 vehicles during the evening peak hour, and we would expect volumes on that street to increase by 36 during this time period. If you look at other streets and corridors, the numbers are also represented and generally lower than that on those other streets. Over the next grouping of slides, I wanted to walk through and share with you some key improvements that we're looking to institute in connection with access and circulation within the site, and then how the site plan would better connect itself to the surrounding context of streets and neighborhoods. So focusing along the frontage of the school, some key actions to be put in place, most notably having ample bike parking and a new blue bike station to really complement and support the many terrific bicycle and pedestrian connectivity solutions that are being put in place both on the eastern and western half of the sites, connecting neighborhoods and connecting those neighborhoods to both the school and the playing fields. We've mentioned many times through feasibility and also tonight that maximizing open space has resulted in a need to support below grade parking underground, and all parking supporting the project is going to be in the B1 level in the basement of the building, and having all parent drop off and pickup also be accommodated below grade underneath the building. And we're going to talk about that in greater detail in one of the following slides. As it relates to Vassal Lane, again, the goal is to really minimize and frankly eliminate drop-off and pickups along Vassal Lane and come up with measures to make that corridor as pedestrian friendly as possible for bikes, pedestrians, and slow down traffic volumes as best we can. Again, the site plan has very strong pedestrian and bicycle connectivity built into it that's reflective of Envision Cambridge, as well as opportunities along the eastern side of the site to get a wide pedestrian path that can also be used for emergency vehicle access if need be, and maintenance of the playing fields. Further, the bus loop shown to the left doubles as the loading and service location, which is tucked into the rear of the property where it's really not visible by the surrounding neighborhoods. And the bus loop, it can accommodate all buses on site, 8 buses total, with the thought that it can double as a midday visitor parking and drop-off location when arrival and dismissal isn't occurring. Further, we're looking at advanced pedestrian warning signage where the multi-use path does connect to the intersection of Concord Ave and Fern. And I'd also add that in terms of pedestrian connectivity outside of the school environment, the city of Cambridge has gone through an extensive rehabilitation of sidewalks and pedestrian crossings in this entire neighborhood, both on the Concord Ave side and the Vassal Lane side. There's really terrific pedestrian connectivity in the area connecting the school to surrounding neighborhoods. This slide denotes the B1 level of the school, with the ramp connecting from Vassal Lane and Standish down below grade to B1, with cars circulating as noted in green in a counterclockwise fashion, providing lots of run room to the drop-off denoted as number 2. The point of this is to create ample drop-off space for those parents that wish to do a quick drop-off, more likely with older children, and provide plenty of queue space that won't back up onto the street. Those parking spaces that are denoted with the orange dashed line are intended to be staff parking spaces. Again, all staff parking will be accommodated on site and below grade, maximizing playing field opportunity. And what we have shown here is an allocation of those parking spaces that are viewed as being the least desirable for short-term pickup and drop off. So all the other spaces that are not delineated are intended for that specific use. And those are drop offs that are longer in nature because of the age of children, in particular the younger Tobin kids who do need to be walked not just into the school, but directly to their classroom to be received by their respective teacher. The project is looking to incorporate significant pedestrian safety improvements along Vassal Lane, including new school zone flashers at either end of Vassal as one approaches the school, significant sidewalk and pedestrian facility improvements, again along the frontage of the school, but also connecting to the multi-use path on the west side of the school site and the community path that would connect the school to the playing fields and onto Concord Avenue. Coming up with solutions that eliminate on-street parking in front of the school and really encourage folks to using the drop-off facilities that are being built below the school and off-street are critical to the success of the project. And then finally, and probably most importantly as it relates to this slide, is measures at the intersection of Standish and Vassal, knowing that that's going to be a very important confluence of vehicle activity to the school and through Vassal, and of course pedestrians and cyclists that are destined to the school. And we're going to look at things like improved crosswalks and advanced warning signs and potentially other measures to improve and emphasize the need for slow vehicle speeds and safety at that location. As a next step, we're going to continue with our analyses, understanding impacts to area intersections that we're studying, and we're going to compile that information into a traffic impact study, a TIS, which is submitted to the city through the Transportation and Parking Department. Their job is to review that study and certify it prior to this project moving forward and being presented to the planning board. So that's certainly a next step for us. We're also obligated to develop a PTDM plan, a parking transportation demand management plan. The purpose of that plan is to set mode share commitments and goals which are aimed at reducing the amount of people who might come to the site and park over a period of time. Those measures are put in place and they're reported on and monitored annually to understand effectiveness moving forward. And again, that is something the school is committed to doing and will do moving forward. So thank you very much. And of course, when the presentation ends, I look forward to questions and comments that folks have. So thank you.
Hi, this is Chris Bradner from Traverse Landscape Architects, and thanks for listening, and rest assured, we are nearing the end of the presentation. I want to expand on some of the items the previous transportation slides touched on, highlighting further development of site improvements and some more specific detail on pedestrian and bicycle use by the community. The colored plan here indicates all the areas where bike parking is planned, including replicating blue bikes, new standard bike parking, and longer-term underground bike parking. There are multi-use paths throughout the site, and we made sure they were well connected for internal walking loops, as well as access to the neighborhoods north and south of the property. Students will have a direct path to the building from both the north and south as shown by the dotted lines. The following 7 slides will illustrate sketches at each area, keyed here along the paths highlighted in the previous slide. Our focus is to show you how we plan on addressing the paths and edges, as well as the contextual relationship to the neighbors and the other open space features. Our hope is that you can envision through these developing sketches what the views will feel like, and we welcome comment at the end of the presentation. Each of the following slides follow this format with an existing picture similar to the view we are sketching in the lower left, the key plan with the location of the view on the upper left, and the proposed sketch to the right. I'll make some comments that we feel are important to point out on each one. For example, it's important to preserve and protect the existing evergreen hedgerow, screening the Armory site from the open park space. Additionally, the sketch also indicates a new 12-foot wide multi-use path striped for two-way use. This path extends all the way from Concord and Fern south to Vassal. This connection is in keeping with Cambridge planning efforts. Continuing south along the path and turning the corner heading west, this sketch shows the view between the Armory property line and the new building service area. We would like to continue a similar evergreen hedge to screen the Armory site and add a shorter evergreen edge along the service area. Turning the corner heading south again, view number 3 indicates an important change. The multi-use path is adjacent to the driveway in this last sketch. This is due to tight constraints and turning movements needed for buses, emergency, and service vehicles. Buffer planting and new fencing are also being developed along the commercial properties. The sidewalk along Vassal continues in the same alignment and width along the street. This view is at the existing bus loop curb cut, as you can see from the existing photograph. I want to point out that this will also be the entrance to the below-grade parking, so the crossing zone here will be large, well signed, and we expect the crossing guard will be here as well. Additionally, we are capturing city street stormwater during a flood event in this area by collecting it in the graded area noted in the sketch and directing the water to the bioswales within the site. Jumping over to a view along the Alpine Street neighbors, there will be a new path positioned further away from the existing trees which we plan on protecting. The width of this path will accommodate maintenance and emergency vehicles as it does today. This view is in the middle of the park viewing east with the Alpine Street neighbors tree line in the distance. This is an important connector path creating a full loop around the field space to the left. We are continuing to develop various park seating, play and open spaces, PV, canopy, and trees for shade, drinking fountains, and dog stations, among other amenities, making this a unique place for the community. Lastly, this sketch illustrates a northern connector path internal to the park that completes the loop and creates space for accessing the park for spectating and gathering. Further development of street edge buffering and seating amenities are ongoing.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to continue to help us advance the renewal of the schools, the DHSP programs, and Father Callanan Playground. We look forward to discussing this presentation with you on our scheduled call.